Jenna's hands were trembling as she wiped the spilled coffee off her apron. It wasn't just the heat or the relentless noise of clinking dishes and murmuring customers. It was him, the biker at table 6. He sat sprawled in the booth like he owned the place, greasy hair tucked behind his ears, thick fingers drumming on the tabletop. He hadn't stopped glaring at her since he walked in. Still as clumsy as last week, he grunted loud enough for half the diner to hear. "Maybe try using both hands next time, sweetheart." A few customers chuckled awkwardly. Jenna felt her face flush, not from embarrassment, but from the sting of helplessness. She bit her lip, grabbed a pot of coffee, and forced a smile. "Need a refill?" she asked, avoiding eye contact. "Sure," he smirked. "Just don't spill it on me, unless you want to end up in my lap." The coffee pot shook slightly in her grip. She turned quickly and walked toward the kitchen, fighting the rising lump in her throat. She couldn't breathe. Without thinking, she pushed through the back door, ripped off her apron, and stepped out into the alley behind the diner. The dry desert air hit her like a slap. She leaned against the sun-warmed brick wall, closed her eyes, and tried not to cry. That's when she heard the voice. "You always let guys like that talk to you like that?" It was calm. Controlled. Almost bored. Jenna spun around. A woman stood there, sleeveless tank, jeans, muscle and presence. Her blonde hair was pulled back tight, and her expression was unreadable, like someone who'd already sized up the danger and decided it wasn't worth worrying about. Jenna blinked. "Who are you?" The woman stepped forward, glancing toward the diner window where the biker was still smirking to himself. "Just someone who doesn't like bullies." She paused. Then added with the faintest hint of a grin. "And someone who's really craving a cup of coffee." Back inside, the air felt heavier. Jenna slipped her apron back on, her pulse still racing. The woman followed her in, calm as if she were just stopping by a bookstore, not about to walk into a storm. The biker glanced up, then did a double take. His smirk twitched. The stranger wasn't just confident, she radiated control. She wasn't trying to take up space. She was the space. Jenna grabbed 2 mugs and started pouring fresh coffee. Her hands still trembled a little, but the woman beside her placed a steadying hand on the counter. "You good?" she asked softly. Jenna hesitated, then gave the smallest nod. "Thanks for earlier." "You didn't have to." "Wasn't for you," the woman said, almost playfully. "I just hate guys like him." Jenna chuckled nervously. "Yeah. He comes in every week. Always the same. Loud. Rude. Like he's looking for someone to push around." The woman raised an eyebrow. "And you let him?" Jenna's face hardened. "What choice do I have?" The woman took a sip of the coffee. Paused. Then locked eyes with Jenna. "Today? You've got me." Across the room, the biker was watching now. He leaned back, stretched out his arms and whistled. "Hey Blondie," he called. "You come with her, or are you just here to make the place look prettier?" The diner went quiet. Jenna winced. The woman turned, casually. Walked toward him. Each step was deliberate. The kind of walk that made people move out of the way without realizing why. The kind of walk that said, "You messed with the wrong universe, buddy." She stopped at his table. "You like making women uncomfortable?" she asked, calm as ever. The biker snorted. "You like pretending you're tough?" Without a word, she reached across the table, not fast, not aggressive, and calmly flipped his plate of half-eaten pancakes onto his lap. The room gasped. Syrup dripped down his jeans. He stared at her, stunned, for a second too long. Then he stood. Big mistake. He towered over her, at least 6'4", all beer gut and biker leather. But she didn't flinch. Didn't blink. Instead, she whispered something low. Something only he could hear. His face changed. The grin slipped. He glanced around, suddenly unsure. Jenna couldn't hear the words. But she saw the look in his eyes. And then, slowly, the biker sat back down. Wordless. Red-faced. Staring at the table like a scolded child. The diner was frozen in time. Forks halfway to mouths. Coffee mugs hovering midair. Even the jukebox in the corner seemed to hush itself. All eyes were locked on the impossible scene, the biker, slumped at his booth, syrup-soaked and silent. Jenna stepped closer, barely able to believe what she'd seen. What did you say to him?" she asked under her breath. The woman didn't look away from the biker. She smiled, but it wasn't a sweet smile. It was the kind of smile that came just before a storm. "I told him something he didn't want to hear," she said. "The truth." Jenna blinked. "What truth?" The woman finally turned to her, eyes sharp, voice low. "That guys like him, they act big because deep down, they know they're small. And I told him exactly how I knew." Before Jenna could reply, the biker suddenly stood up again, too fast. His chair scraped loudly across the floor. "I don't know who the hell you think you are," he growled, fists clenched. "But you just made a big mistake." The room tensed. Chairs shifted. A busboy ducked behind the counter. Jenna's heart kicked into overdrive. But the woman didn't flinch. She just took a slow, calm step forward. Then another. Until she was toe-to-toe with him. "You really want to do this here?" she asked. "In front of witnesses?" His eyes flicked around the room. People were watching. Phones were out. And still, that unshakable calm in her voice, like she wanted him to try. He shoved her. Hard. Jenna gasped. For half a second, the woman stumbled back. But just half a second. Then she looked up, and her face changed. The playfulness was gone. All that was left was focus. One breath later, the diner watched in stunned silence as she grabbed the biker's arm, twisted it effortlessly, and sent him crashing over the booth table with a loud thud. Plates shattered. Syrup flew. The biker groaned on the ground, trying to process what just happened. Someone whispered, "Holy sh*T, is that?" Jenna felt like her brain short-circuited. Ronda. Freaking Rousey. The woman who just ragdolled a full-grown man like he was a gym mat was Ronda Rousey. UFC legend. Olympic judo medalist. The reason half the guys in the diner used to act tough until they saw her in the ring. And she was standing in Jenna's diner. Holding her coffee like nothing just happened. "You're her," Jenna breathed, half to herself. Ronda glanced at her with a small smirk. Was wondering how long it'd take. "But, why are you here?" "Like, here. You hiding from paparazzi or?" "Craving pancakes," Ronda said, stepping over the biker still groaning on the floor. "And maybe something more." Jenna stared at her, still stunned. "Like what?" "Justice," Ronda said simply. The biker let out a low moan, trying to get up. Ronda turned back, her voice cool but firm. "Stay down, tough guy. You've embarrassed yourself enough for one morning." He looked up at her, and for the first time, really looked. The kind of look a predator gives when it finally realizes it's not at the top of the food chain. Then he limped toward the door without another word. The bell above it jingled as he stumbled out into the sunlight, defeated. The diner exploded. People clapped. Someone whistled. Even old George in the corner muttered, "Well, I'll be damned." Ronda just slid into the biker's booth, leaned back, and raised her eyebrows at Jenna. "So? You gonna take my order now, or what?" Jenna exhaled a shaky laugh and nodded, finally regaining feeling in her legs. Yeah, I think you've earned a full stack. On the house." As she turned toward the kitchen, the adrenaline started to wear off, and something else crept in. A different kind of tension. Because now that the danger had passed, the questions began. Why was Ronda Rousey really here? Why this diner, in the middle of nowhere? And why had she looked at Jenna, right before walking in, like she already knew her? Jenna tried to focus on the sizzling griddle, but her mind was spinning like the ceiling fan overhead. Bacon, eggs, pancakes, muscle memory took over. But in her chest, her heart was pounding. Why had Ronda looked at her like that? She loaded the plate and carried it back out, nerves prickling. Ronda sat exactly where she'd left her, sipping coffee like she hadn't just humbled a man twice her size in front of an entire room of strangers. As Jenna set the plate down, Ronda spoke without looking up. "You used to fight, didn't you?" The question hit like a jab to the ribs. Jenna froze. "What? You've got a fighter's shoulders. Calloused knuckles. But your posture's hesitant. Like someone made you forget who you are." Jenna stepped back, her throat tightening. "I haven't fought in a long time." Ronda finally looked up. Her gaze was sharp, but not unkind. "Why?" Jenna hesitated. The truth tasted bitter. "Because one night, I fought the wrong guy. And the cops took his side. Said I went too far. Lost my gym. My license. Everything." Ronda nodded slowly, chewing a bite of pancake. "And now you're here, letting scumbags talk to you like garbage because they think you forgot how to hit back." Jenna crossed her arms. "What do you want from me?" Ronda leaned forward, elbows on the table, voice lower now. "You think this was random? That I just showed up for syrup and small talk?" Jenna's breath caught. "I've been looking for you, Jenna." The diner noise faded into a hum. For a moment, it felt like the two of them were the only ones in the world. "Why?" Ronda reached into her jacket and slid a small folded paper across the table. Jenna picked it up with trembling fingers. It was a flyer. Black and red. Stark letters. Women's Underground, invite only. Real fights. Real money. Real payback. At the bottom, scribbled in Sharpie. "Jenna Davis, you're not done yet." That night, Jenna couldn't sleep. The flyer sat on her nightstand like a lit fuse. She'd read it a dozen times. Memorized every word. Real fights. Real money. Real payback. The part that echoed the loudest? "You're not done yet." She stared at her reflection in the bathroom mirror. The faint scar above her eyebrow. The knuckles that never fully softened. The eyes that, for years, had looked tired. But now, something was different. She saw it the moment Ronda stepped into the diner. Recognition. Not just from Jenna. From Ronda too. Like they'd both survived something, and Jenna was the one who forgot what survival really meant.